Hi, everybody. I'm Ralph Ben-Murgy. Welcome to Not That Kind of Rabbi. As I always do at the beginning of this podcast, I clarify that I am indeed not a rabbi. I am a mashgiach. I am a ordained spiritual director, horrible term, director. I do spiritual counseling and workshops, amongst other things. But, it's interesting. I was just at I virtually had to attend a men's retreat, a Jewish men's retreat. It's called JMR. It's part of an organization called Menschworks that I'm part of in the United States. So it's in Connecticut. So I couldn't get over the border. We're not allowed until next month. Do a land crossing, that is. And I've been going for, about 7 years now. It's the 30th JMR just happened now. For any Jewish men out there who are looking for a Jewish renewal kind of approach to their spirituality and their religion, it's a wonderful weekend. I would strongly suggest it. So anyway, I was there virtually, and it was very interesting to not actually feel the Sabbath service and the breakout groups that we get into, but every year I do it. It helps to kind of ground me again. It helps me to, be in the company. In this case, exclusively of Jewish men, but men who have gained an emotional and spiritual vocabulary, so that we can work together to be intimate in our relationship as men, as opposed to sitting there talking about the Red Sox or the Blue Jays or, whatever. It's a lot better to talk about life and where we're at and where we've been. It's kind of revealing in many ways. One of the things I find interesting is there is a kind of yearning out there for a spiritual life. And one of the things that was said, I interviewed Rabbi Mordechai Liebling, who's in the States and an activist, and it was about activism. How do you employ your spiritual life to become an activist for things you believe and care about? Interesting, though, that you have to be careful that you think, okay, well, my activism is good, but your activism is bad. So if I don't agree with you, then you shouldn't, but I should. So anyway, one of the things he said that just caught me was the Reconstructionist Judaism version of what God is, because God gets used a lot as a word. And in this case, it was the life energy of the universe. And I thought that was wonderful because it's what I've been trying to articulate for myself and for other people when I work with them as a spiritual counselor is, let's put the God thing on the table for a second. And let's just say, is there no God in your life? And, when people say I don't believe in God, the answer is usually from the counselor, well, tell me about the God you don't believe in. And you end up with this kind of, guy on a throne with a beard and a naughty and nice list, which would be Santa Claus, but wouldn't be God. So the idea of the life energy of the universe really fits with my worldview. So I liked it quite a bit as a kind of a paradigm from which to work. So that was, I guess, one of my big takeaways from the weekend. You get little nuggets, right? And that was one of them because it helps me to, in my worldview, I'm more of I guess I look at the universe and think, I'm nothing, but this is a moment, a human moment, and I should do whatever I can to be a good nothing, not a bad nothing. Because if you think about it, there's literally more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on the planet Earth. And that kind of knowledge allows a humility to be able to say, well, then if I'm just this little piece of this little piece of this little piece, then what am I doing here? Becomes, well, you can be a healthy part of that or a cancerous part of that. And that's enough work for one short mortal life. So just wanted to share that with you as something that it's animated me in the last few days after the retreat. And boy, it's good to just do a retreat. I wish I could have been there in person again this year, but next year, not in Jerusalem, but next year in Connecticut is where I hope to be. All right, let's start. Annette Poizner, psychotherapist, hypnotherapist, Kabbalist, and author, a busy person, is my guest today. And hi, how are you?
Hi, great to be here.
Well, so if somebody says to you, what's this Kabbalah thing? Which is like a 17,000 word answer, but what do you tell them in the elevator on the way up?
In the elevator, I like where you're going with the life energy of the world, or how about the delicious life energy of the world, right?
At times.
Well, you could say that sometimes we end up blocking our receptivity to the most delicious parts of it. And some of our own ordeals may be a function of ways that we ourselves have not created a vessel that can properly, receive the nourishment, maybe we could say. So I think I would probably say that Kabbalah is the Jewish version of Chinese medicine or chakras in Hinduism and the yogic psychology, an energy model that can allow us how to work the system in a way that we can thrive and that we can potentially resolve longstanding psychological difficulties. So that's like a real one-liner. How's that,
Well, yeah, interesting because so I come from the renewal movement. So for us, the short form for Kabbalah is the four worlds idea, right? Mm-hmm. The body, the heart, the mind, the spirit, and that we work in those, and often we kind of reside in one as a sort of a refuge, a comfort, but we don't really access all four at the same time in the way that we could. And I guess what you just said reminds me of the idea, which is prevalent in all mystic traditions, of availability, that you got to be present and available to actually see the deliciousness that you're talking about, right?
Yeah. And I liked that one of the rabbis, Adin Steinsaltz, wrote about the tree of life, which we're talking about the same energy model. And it signifies energy centers in the body and connective pathways. So let's call that the Jewish version of the chakras or the meridians. He likened it, he said, imagine if there's a system where you have birds that access their nutrient, and if they'll just allow all the energy to come down in these pipes and channels, then they're going to have like great food. It's going to be good. The problem is sometimes the birds get a little overactive and they're pecking away. They end up destroying the model a little bit. They create a blockage over here. And if it's blocked over here, then it gets sort of overactive over here. There's now an imbalance in the energy thing, and they can't get proper delivery of the nutrient that in fact is meant for them. So that was his way. I liked that way of thinking about it, in which case we now can look at when people are coming in with challenges, often long-standing challenges. I've been working with obsessive compulsive disorder for many years, that if you have this lens, you now see, this particular sphera, energy center, we could call it, or divine attribute, is overactive. This particular one, each of which governs a psychological skill set or perspective, that one's blocked, deficient, and undeveloped. No wonder. You could almost get a bit of a vision of what's happening in the circuitry, and then that gives you a nice target for making some changes. It's literally like moving energy.
So how do you then figure out what the diagnostic is when you're dealing with someone who comes in and says, I suffer from anxiety, and I have a what if life that is just driving me nuts. What is it that you can do in the 10 different containers that are the Kabbalistic tree? What is it you can do that can help that person? And how do you find a way to do that?
Okay, so first we have to talk about assessment, and then we could talk about the movement of the work. Okay. So the assessment, so I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Alfred Adler, but he came up with a fascinating test called the earliest recollection test. I've been using it for decades. You ask a person, there's a certain format for them to pull this together. You say, I'd like you to give over to me in writing your 10 earliest memories. a memory is defined not as something we used to go to the beach. It has to be something that happened once, okay? So, and then there's a format, vivid moment, vivid feeling. There's directions I give people. So that is one thing that I'm collecting from everybody. And now it's an interesting thing because of the structure of the world. If you ask somebody for 10 of anything, you are going to get a bit of a read on what's cooking with those 10 sefirot. Because the first one, interestingly, is going to tell you something about Chokhmah, what's happening on that end. And the second one's going to tell you something about Bina, Da'at.
What are Chokhmah and Bina, just for people who don't know?
Okay, these are the divine attributes, each of which has their own name. And here's my little picture here. Yeah. Some people will recognize it. And those 10 attributes with those connecting channels are an energy grid, which is really ours. This being known as the tree of life, as the infrastructure that the divine uses in the creation of this world. But because we're made in the image of the divine, it's also our energetic anatomy. So if you ask somebody for their 10 earliest memories, they're interpreted. And my offer to you stands if you would like to undergo this sort of assessment. I've done it with journalists probably 20 times or more. And the work has been featured in dailies across Canada and trade magazines or whatever. Another thing that I'm doing is using the dreams. People come in, I say, please write down a few dreams you remember from childhood, if that's the case. Another thing, and this is part of my background, my inroad into this field, psychology and social work, was the psychology of handwriting, which in Israel is called graphologia. And I am the author of a few books, but one of them is this one. It's Clinical Graphology, an interpretive manual for mental health practitioners. This relates to my doctoral dissertation at the University of Toronto. Basically, I came to realize when I was analyzing handwriting, then learning Kabbalah, those principles a graphologist uses to interpret handwriting are the same principles we find in the Tree of Life and the Sefirot. So you can actually even look at signatures. You can get, you'll see all of this, the dreams, the memories, the handwriting, will paint a picture of what's happening with the Sefirot. And it becomes, the first step is always doing this X-ray, so to speak, where people will get a download and it's got to be jaw-dropping. Did you talk to my mother? How do you know this? Okay. And I got stories to tell, okay? I didn't come in about that. How did you know I have this problem, right? It's all, and you can show and explain it to people.
So
that's the assessment.
Yeah, okay, so that's crazy.
It is crazy.
It's crazy. But how do you know you're doing the right thing at that point? Because one of the things about all the pieces you're pulling in at the same time is it could just be, well, that feels good. Well, that might be right. How do you distill that into something you can repeat and sustain with people?
See, that's why I like to do this with journalists, because then you'll tell me and the audience how it happens, okay? Because what I'm doing, I've got to find the common link between the dreams, the memories, the handwriting. People are so fundamentally expressive. They shine out their life and their themes in everything they do. And Freud had this line where he basically said, if people are silent with their lips, they chatter with their fingertips. So I have to say, okay, folks, you're the expert. I want to tell you what I'm seeing here. Is this ringing any bells? And it's really for the client to go like, oh my gosh, I never put that together. The other funny thing is people write down these memories and they're like, this lady's nuts. She thinks she's going to find something in here. Like, this is like rubbish. And then when I've worked it over, they're like, oh my gosh, it is so obvious. Now you can't not see it. Okay, whatever the theme is, it's going, because we are repetitive and we keep banging the same drum again and again. And again, that's how my work has been featured in dailies across Canada, because I would say to the journalists, test it. Let's do you.
Mhm.
Okay. So people are like, interesting.
All right. Well, we might do me, but I want to talk more first. And not because I'm like, oh, I've got to make sure you're here. Um, I'm wondering, you spoke about the divine and
Okay.
the idea of this being the tetragram being the divine blueprint, basically. How are you sure that this is a direct situation for you, that there is an intelligent force of the universe, and that we as humans in this little dirt ball in the middle of nowhere can actually discern what that is, and that it's about us?
So I'll tell you, the other area of intense interest for me is Chinese medicine, Chinese medical theory, which I've been studying for 20 years. And what fascinates me is the overlap between the ideas of Jewish mysticism and Chinese medical theory. And it therefore gives me the privilege of being able to weave the commonalities between these two ancient peoples who are looking at reality with such a similar lens, and I'm finding like this hybrid of a model and an infrastructure that shines through the languages of two different people who I consider almost older brother, younger brother, kid brother kind of energy. So for example, a book that has been a huge influence for me is this one, Kabbalistic Writings on the Nature of Masculine and Feminine. Sarah Schneider, who I've studied with, is a Kabbalist in the Old City. And this was a turning point because, of course, this is all about yin and yang. And then to study such things from the Chinese perspective, you will find there is a very definite order that emerges. And it's like we're doing Braille and we go, there it is. And how is it? Just to give you examples, the Chinese will talk about this higher soul. They call it the Shen. Well, mystically, we understand the Hebrew letters. The world is comprised of the Hebrew letters. And the Shin is the Shin, the Hebrew letter Shin, right? There it is, folks. It's a fire, and it makes the sound of fire. Shh. And we acknowledge it all the time. For example, if you want to say to the kids, can you keep it down? What are you saying? Shh. Now, what we're saying is the Shin is that what let's say a kid is yelling. So you don't say the kid is yelling, So you don't say, don't do it. Because the kid yelling is an expression of the Shen making noise. Shh. And what is this pathway? This is Dalit. In our little map here, Dalit goes from here down to here. Dalit is limitation. The four worlds, the number four in Chinese, they don't like that word because it sounds like death. You won't have a Chinese doctor meeting you in room number 4, where the assumption is it's going to be like bad diagnosis and no Chinese are going to use that room. So my doctor used to have 0, 1, 2, 3. Those were his rooms. Okay. So this mannerism is saying deploy the energy of limitation over your Shen, which is a little too active right now. So there are any number of ways we're working with this infrastructure without even acknowledging that we have this infrastructure. Is that clear?
Yeah, but how do you? Where's the certainty that this is divine in its emanation, and that we are privy to this divine emanation in this universe of a trillion billion stars? Why us?
Well, okay, but because I'm interested in Chinese medicine and because I'm interested in function, and on one hand, I'm a member of the Canadian Association for Spiritual Care, but on the other hand, I'm a registered social worker, and on the other hand, I'm mostly working with secular people. Okay, so it doesn't. People with aren't particularly interested in spiritual. They have an OCD or they have a problem and they want to get better. Okay, so. My perception is that this is divinity as it is shining in our lives, okay? But I think my clients would say there's some sort of organized energy that is predictable that we can find and it seems to be reflective and helping me somehow, resolve blocks and cultivate strengths and be more effective. So whether it is, then you get into matters of personal faith. And I mean, I'm not a spiritual director, I'm a clinical social worker. And people are often calling me mainly because I've helped people, be it with anorexia or OCD or weird and wonderful problems that haven't responded to conventional psychotherapy. So I have been able, I have some crazy stories where using these energy visions of understanding how things would seem to be in the psyche as per Jewish mysticism and traditional Chinese medicine, what the ideal psyche looks like when it's balanced and healthy. Using that map has directed me in helping what may be improving the flow of energy, and as a side benefit, resolving and improving complaints and symptoms that people have struggled with for a long time.
So you don't need me to believe that this is a divine plan.
No,
but you
and
do.
And I don't talk about it. No, I don't talk about it.
But you do believe it's a divine plan.
I do believe it, yeah.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you, cards on the table, I'm an Orthodox Jew.
Okay. So that means an even more detailed plan, right? Because there's a whole geography and architecture to Orthodoxy where I always say to people, for someone who's Orthodox, Friday night and Saturday, the Shabbat, the Sabbath, is not something we go, maybe this week I'll do it. You do it because that's part of the plan. You're supposed to do it to realize the bigger plan. So there is a whole structure there. Why that? Why do you choose Orthodoxy and not what I do, for instance, renewal, or Reconstructionism or whatever? Why choose that as your path?
My path, I'll tell you, I went to day school. And then I didn't find it all that convincing. So I left it, right? And then, in order to get back in, it had to be compelling for me. And it made a lot of sense when I was doing some studies in my 20s. It kind of all fit together for me. And then certain teachers who have made a huge imprint, real geniuses in the Orthodox community. So probably one of the people who really got me going with both Judaism and with healing, use of Judaism within healing, is Rabbi Akiva Tatz. He's a medical doctor. This book, Living Inspired, he presents in it a model of reality. And I thought it was brilliant. And I guess you could say that model of reality would relate to this infrastructure that we're talking about. He teaches a lot of mysticism. I was sold. So that's personal. But I work a lot with non-Jews, is the truth. So, I'm not talking to them about keeping Shabbat or anything like that. Anyway, but I'm interested. I do a lot of reading, and I've certainly enjoyed some of the renewal. Rabbi Shalom Shakti.
Shachter Shalomi.
Shachter Shalomi, right.
Zalman Shachter Shalomi.
Yes, right. And there's other people who you probably are aware of. There's a social worker on my shelf. She wrote a book called Sacred Therapy. I thought it was fabulous.
Right. Yeah, it's a good book.
Estelle
I got it somewhere in here.
A fabulous book.
Yeah.
So those I do read, in that category as well. But I'm comfortable in that. I'm more modern Orthodox, I think I'd say. But
yeah,
that's where my comfort zone is.
Interesting. So we're taking the not so old tradition of psychotherapy, right? The much older idea of Kabbalistic Judaism. So when you look at Torah, a Bible, Old Testament, do you see it as metaphorical or do you see it as literal?
I see it as multi-layered and all of the above and more. I see it like this hidden, coded, mysterious text that allows us to constantly visit and go in yet another deeper layer. And on a superficial level, I see it, and I do actually quote a lot, like Lech Lecha is the hero's journey, as something that each person will have to go through their Lech Lecha, leave the home of your father, go to the land, I'm going to show you. I am constantly citing, my joke to my clients is, oh yeah, I work so hard to give you a good Jewish education, right? And all the Catholic girls and the Chinese and, right?
Do you mention to them that in Lech Lecha you end up at a place where there's a famine? I'm telling everybody. There's a famine when you get there. There's a drought.
I know, that's the point. Who would want to go?
Who would want to go?
Yes, and that's exactly where you are. And it's calming to people because like they thought they were taking this like departure. Yeah. And I said, quoting Rabbi Tatz, it's an ordeal. The departure is absolute and the destination is unknown. The thing I like about Lech Lecha, well, there's many things, but Lech and Lecha are the same word, okay, with different punctuation. They equal, if you use the numerology of the letters, 50, 50, 50, there's our 100. Lech is yang, go. Lecha is yin, to yourself. And it's like, that's what Chinese medicine would say, whatever your neuroses from childhood, Lech Lecha means go to your inner yin yang, cultivate it. If there were certain neuroses that took, that's your family of origin. Come on, it's time to let go of that. Okay, grow up. Let's take those shackles and let them go. So, moving on now.
Just when you said grow up, I just thought, okay, so you're kind of a tough therapist at times.
I am a tough therapist. I am. One time a client was asked, a therapist? She said, well, let's put it this way. I know two. One of them is, the really, nice. This one. She said the other one's like tough love. The woman says, I think I need tough love. So she became my client.
Oh boy, it's so interesting. There is a yearning, right? There is a yearning for meaning, but there's also a yearning to be free. And yet, if you look at, I've always loved the idea that, the Israelites get out of Egypt, they're supposedly free, and all they can do is whine and complain and want to go back because it gave them good structure, So when you're dealing with people who are in a therapeutic process, they may come to you and say, I want to be better. But do they really want to be better? Or are they just hoping that you will aha moment them and they'll be, boom, fine?
I think it's pretty universal that people are basically coming in and saying, love this, love that, love this. Could you keep all that the same? Just if we have a little erase, we're going to, right? And that's where all these memories and dreams come into it. Because I'm like, okay, well, let's look under the hood. Let's just look under the hood. And then I can say what I see. Does this make sense to you? I mean, the client has the last word if it makes sense, but it tends to make sense. And then it's like, So then we have a contract, meaning I'm saying if you fix the overall structural imbalance, not only will you achieve that outcome, but you'll have many improvements in your life, but you have to change, or you could keep trying to look for something that's going to just erase this. And I always say it because when you do hypnosis and when you have treatment, training in hypnosis, then people like to think of that as the magic bullet. Just erase this. Would you just erase that? And I don't want to set up that expectation because it seems to be that people need whatever restructuring. Let's think about the symptom as needing to birth what it wants to be when it grows up. And they're in a labor pain. And if the labor pain was sort of a little further along, what would it look like?
Right. So what does hypnosis bring to this conversation?
Well, I think we're always in some variant of hypnosis or hypnotic trance or concentrative experience. So, that's not the big focal point. I do it here and there, but I'm doing some imagery work with people and using some techniques. If you're familiar with neuro-linguistic programming or EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, I consider myself an engineer. My brother's an engineer, my father's an engineer, and my mom was a teacher. So I'm a little hybrid of something between an engineer and a teacher. And sometimes people need a little bit of orientation to where they are in the their lifestyle and how they're living and what are the sequelae of how they're living, right? That's the teaching part. But there's other things about really doing structural change that involves technical work with people. So, and hypnosis.
EMDR. So it's used in PTSD, for instance, right?
But it's also used a different way. It's used for ego strengthening or resource installation.
Ego strengthening or resource installation. In other words, finding parts of yourself that are underdeveloped that are needed to help you to be better.
Yes.
Okay.
And you could think about them, since we've been talking about this model, is that the 22 pathways each represent a Hebrew letter. And those Hebrew letters each represent skill sets or archetypes that Jung would talk about them as archetypes that are essential for our integration and for shining out these archetypes in order to have the proper flow. So for me, sometimes I'm looking at what I've seen in terms of what the pattern, what the energetic landscape looks like. And then I got to go, what are the archetypes that are going to help open things up over here? We need a little of this and we need a little of that. And, and I start, and that's where the ego strengthening comes in, because you want to get a feel for where this particular archetype plays a role. What's the mother archetype like in their situation? A lot of people have a problem in terms of how they're mothering themselves, for example, and how their mother mothered herself, because they often take in the mothering, they were mothered fine, but the way mother mothered herself might have been self-neglecting, masochistic even. These things get imprinted and then they become patterns that we replicate, and then may find partners who are neglectful and who are emissaries of poor mothering themselves at the same time as they're not good at mothering others. There's all these dynamics play out, and we have all these archetypes in us. So it's interesting to explore the subcomposite parts of personality that we find within and to rearrange how they're functioning.
So you draw from so many different things, but you see a commonality. There's something universal that says, if it's Chinese medicine or Kabbalah or
Carl Jung
or hypnotherapy, what is that piece that makes you go, this is all part of the same thing?
And it shines out. It is, I just heard a wonderful shiur by Rabbi Mendel Kessin. He talked about, in the Messianic time, what is the tool of the Messianic character who relates to Yosef, which is the character who sort of comes to bring clarity on the world and helps people to understand that that's the point at which they say the knowledge of God will be as widespread as the water in the ocean, if you've heard that.
Yeah.
Was Isaiah, maybe? Anyway, so he gave the example that the tool of the Messiah is the horns of the ox. And it was fascinating because he's pointing out, what do the horns of the ox represent? It's the zone of chokhmah or wisdom, and it comes from this part of the animal. And you see a horn that goes, and he said that represents the unity frame where we see everything as related to everything else, where we see a master. Maybe we'll call it we know about the Fibonacci code, right? In other words, we have certain numbers that we find repeated in nature. Or here, how's about this? We have the Hebrew letter Hey, which is the number 5. So we have 5 books of Moses. There's 5 mentions of the light at the beginning of Genesis. And one commentator says, that's the 5-fold light at the root of creation. In Genesis, there are 4 rivers, and the source river, there's 5 rivers. So there's 5 waters as well. And we use, of course, the Hebrew letter He, number 5, for a short name for divinity, if we don't want to use the tetragrammaton, right? And Chinese medicine just happens to talk about 5-element theory. And there's a wonderful correlation between 5-element theory and any number of things going on in Judaism. Then,
so we're all, there's a book Matthew Fox wrote called One River, Many Wells.
Okay.
Right.
I haven't read it.
Right. So it's just the idea, what you're talking about for me is making me think of, we, in our own ways, in different cultures in different parts of the world, we're going after the same yearnings and we're going after the same answers. We're just finding them differently. It's like the idea of the flood story. Every culture has a flood story.
Exactly.
We just, in ours, we just went past the Noah story, which is our flood story, which, so I guess when you see something, you kind of see a diamond that you just keep turning the different facets of, right?
That's exactly right. By the way, my Hebrew name is Hannah. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Chaim is the number, that's Chet Nun, is the number 58. And 58, I understand, at least it used to be the most common cut of a diamond. And Chaim is grace. So it's as if we are ourselves with all these different facets. And we keep cutting the diamond. That's a great name for a therapist. Chaim, hey. How do we find the 5 elements or the 5 quintessential, because quinta is 5, aspects of self that can be shaped with all these little razor cuts? So we find the diamond in the world, we find the diamond in reality, and we find the diamond in ourselves, and we shape and buffer and cut, and right? And in so doing, we get magnificent changes and
shifts. You got to write that down now, because this is the intro to your next book, okay?
This is
you're going to get off, and you're going to get off, and you're going to go, what the diamond, the 5?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
How did I say that?
Yeah, that's
right.
Writing
I used to work in comedy years ago, and somebody would in the writing room would say something very funny, and 3 people would turn all to each other and whoever else was in the room would go, write that down. Write that down. You got to write that down. Because if you get the one word wrong, it's no longer funny.
That's exactly right.
Right.
And by the way, that's one of my books is called Knock Knock, The Kabbalah of Comedy, The How, Why, and What of Funny. And the reason I did that is because over COVID, it's like, well, I sort of gave up my offices. I was working more online, whatever. Thought, you know what? Let's visit Mary Tyler Moore and Rhoda from yesteryear, because I used to love those shows.
Sure.
And I haven't watched TV. Those were funny Jewish humor, by the way. Unmatched.
Ooh, I have something to say to you.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
Get out, Ted. No. This is important.
Yeah, exactly. So when I came back to Mary Tyler Moore and I watched that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is complete Kabbalah. And basically what I did is went through, I'm telling you, you can look at the Mary Tyler Moore show as a Jewish morality play. And there are layers and layers of Kabbalah that have these brilliant Jewish writers who don't even know they're channeling this stuff genetically and don't even realizing that they are doing classic Jewish teachings. And with the brilliant idea of making the Jewish girl, the non-Jewish one is like the teacher, is the tzaddik, okay, the elder, who sort of figures out how to, or the good one. How about that? The good one.
Right.
And the bad one, so to speak, is the Jewish one. It's all written by Jews. What a better way to put a morality lesson out, but having good laughs at the same time, with one pivot who is like the good one, with all these nut bars around, all these extreme characters. And anyway, it goes on and on. I've got like 100-page book about the Kabbalah of comedy.
So the lens, you have found a way to see the world through this lens.
Yes.
Without, I think for a lot of people, Kabbalah is intimidating. the 10 different sefirot or containers, and the lower realms, the higher realms, the interconnection between them, trying to remember which one is which and where they go. And for a lot of people, they just pass, which I think is why sometimes the teachings become about 4 worlds and not 10 sefirot and 22 pathways, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Which I understand, because that's what I ended up with. It's like, I don't think I can keep all this in my head and do it properly. So if I came into, okay, I'll give you a dream of mine from when I was a kid. You want to try this?
Yeah, let's do.
All right. So grew up, came from Morocco, 2 years old, youngest in the family, grew up in downtown Toronto, not midtown, downtown Toronto. So I used to have this dream where I was on one of the old red and white streetcars.
Okay.
Right. And I was with my mother, and it would, at a certain point, it would stop, and the doors at the back would open, and the streetcar would tilt and start tilting more and more towards the street, and everything sliding. And I'm trying to hold on to my mother, but I can't. And I'm going to go out the door.
Okay.
And I'm really scared. I'm small. I'm a little kid, and I am lost control and power. I'm gone. I'm going out this door, and often there would be, which was quite common in the late 1950s in Toronto. You would see people who were crippled, polio, the big shoe, that kind of thing. So there would always be one of those characters in the streetcar as well. And then I would go towards the door and be in complete panic, and then the dream would be over. I wouldn't get out the door. I would just go. I knew I was going out the door.
Wait, when you go, are you going on your own steam, or are you being kind of swept out the door?
Yeah, I'm being swept out the door because I nothing to hold on to, and I'm just trying to not leave, and out I go. Okay. So I used to have that every once in a while.
And okay, so that's recurrent dream.
Yeah.
So right there, and of course I would need to ideally to see the 10 memories, because that's going to be the big picture.
Yeah.
Okay? But that dream, where at the first place I go, it has to do with a gvura situation. It's a dream that's reminding you that there are unknown, powerful forces that can emerge out of in a very mundane situation. In other words, it's a dream that is designed to enhance detail focus, caution, precision. In other words, there's this 2 aspects of yin and yang, okay? Imagine yin as the brakes, and imagine yang as the accelerator. Okay, we've got those 2 in the car. That's our yin and yang. Now, the streetcar is moving. Okay. Now, as soon as something's moving, as soon as something's moving, you have less control, right? As soon as something's stopped, you have full control. Okay. So in this moving car, suddenly it's moving, but you're not in control of how it's moving and what's moving. And now it's starting to move in ways it's not really supposed to move. And you're not only, is it hard for you to integrate and cope with it, it's actually going to just move you right out of a situation that has a definition into a situation that sounds dangerous and precarious, right? So it's as if yin, we said, is the brakes, yang is, so it's as if this particular sphera is kind of saying, you know what, you just can't be too careful. You just never know whether the forces of dynamism, the luminosity in the world that allows things to come and thrive and glitch and flow, can that really be trusted? Or is it going to glitch in a way that ends up being almost life-threatening, you could almost say. So we could say, so let's say I had to predict and guess, then maybe I'm going to guess that as a kid, you're going to check things a few extra times. You're going to be kind of precise in your work, and you're going to have more, so to speak, control issues. That, you know, it's going to be hard to just go with the flow, because there's a root issue that as if is saying, I don't trust flow so much, you know, like, I don't know, like that's where unseen forces take over and just thrust things in a different way that I didn't think was going to happen. So does that speak to you? Does that
it does. I mean, I don't think I grew up as somebody who had control issues. I don't think I'm a particularly controlling kind of guy. But I do know that being an immigrant and being a little kid in a city where they speak English, we speak Spanish, for instance. Right, where I am not in control of my circumstances and situation because I'm just a little kid in Kensington Market and Regent Park, where we really had no control over the situation, and it was a very precarious one. You had to understand the code and the format. So the format for me was, who are these people and how do they behave and what do they do? And the code, I'll give you an example. When I was a late teenager, my best friend would always find us jobs. I never found them. And he found us one working on a construction site in a subdivision where we had to put in the socket covers and things like that. And lunch break or the break happened at 10:30 in the morning, and the horn went from the snack truck. And I went out there and I had to understand what is the code of these workers. And so they swear every fourth word.
Oh, wow.
Because that's how you talk. Everything has an F in it. So that I had to do. But the other thing was, at the time, I think it was 19, I was smoking cigarettes. And I had a cigarette on the end of my fingers. So I was smoking it like this with my legs crossed.
Yeah.
And I looked around at everybody and I realized wrong format, wrong code.
Mm-hmm.
So I turned the cigarette in towards me so I would smoke it like this. Right, towards my mouth in a fist. And I uncrossed my legs so that one leg was sort of on a 90-degree angle dangling above the resting leg, so that I looked like them and talked like them, because as an immigrant, you have to know how to do that. So
I think you're right. I think that's what it is. You're coming from a different environment. You're thrown in the busyness. You're not even in the suburbs. It's very dynamic downtown and all the different ethnicities and this, and it feels like a whirling vortex. And there you are on a TTC bus, which is a metaphor for here I am in Toronto in the thick of all the busyness, right? And it feels, and therefore, but you see that the focus on how to do it and the reading of it, that's it. That is, I got to use my Gvul Radik, detail conscious, read it, be very careful. You've got to read these intense patterns, sort yourself out. When we're a little anxious, we'll get detail focus. So that's how it works. You sort of throw in a dream, and then I'll go with something, and then you sort of refine how it feels relevant.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. So it makes sense.
All right. So 2 more things.
Okay.
Angels.
Okay.
So in my spiritual direction training, at one point we had to do the rabbi teaching us. We were doing angels, and I'm inside my head, I'm like, oh, for God's sake, don't be ridiculous. And then she, of course, turns right to me and says, and you'll be doing a presentation on angels. And I said, Rabbi, really, honestly, I have a lot of trouble with this. She said, perfect. I'm looking forward to your dissertation. So it was very interesting because in my own work now, I use angel meditations as energetic energetic flows, not, John Travolta with wings on and chain smoking in a kitchen. So for me, I use 4 angels. I use Michael for love, Gabriel for strength, Uriel for purpose and vision, and Raphael, my angel, for healing.
Yes, right. I was going to say.
Yeah. So I use that to help people to feel like they have protection and they have safety, and that they can focus anything through that lens and go around with it and take each one with them. You start with love, you move it to love and strength. Love and strength can give you purpose and vision, and then purpose and vision need healing and support, right? So I find it was really fun. And I'm wondering, in your work, where do angels land, if at all?
So I have to say, and I've done the reading, and I just need to say my little tangent, okay? Because I always look up a person's name in terms of the meaning. The Talmud teaches that the only prophecy that exists in this world is, functionally, is when parents name children. So I forgot to mention, when we're talking about other things, I want to look at the person's name, understanding something of their essence is going to be coming through in their name. So when you mentioned angels, and I thought, Raphael, there you go. Right. Okay. I am a clinical social worker, and I don't really talk about angels. So, I feel that my work is directed, spiritually infused, but I need to meet my people where they are. And
yeah. But in your life,
Oh, in my life, well, I mean, I'm more interested, like that, for example, vis-a-vis dreaming, there's this idea, and I have a source about it, that when the soul leaves, and I have had an interesting kind of out-of-body experience waking up only once in my life that allowed me to be as if above the body as I was waking up, to experience being out of the body. When I was alerted, it was the funniest thing. I wake up, like my body is frozen, but I wake up and I hear someone breathing. Like, who's here? Who's here? Right? Like, I was like, oh my gosh. So I quickly wake myself up. And in the course of doing it, I feel this experience of kind of going as if, and the breathing was me. Wow. So from that, it was like I heard someone breathing 2 feet away, but it was me anyway. So there was nobody there. So anyway, so the thing is, when we dream or we go up, and if we're intermingling with more positive angels, then we can have some dreams that are really guidance and, helpful. We could also have negative dreams. There's angels out there that are more of a negative force, right. In which case you don't look at every dream and go, oh, this is genius. Sometimes it's a form of corruption that is, a neuroses that has taken the conch, right. And is giving a negative message. So, I've read about all the angels. I don't know if you know the work of Rabbi Yitzhak Ginsburg, but no. I did study. He has a school called the Jewish School of Psychology, I believe, and I was an online student there for a few years. And his books, I've got maybe about 12 of his books, and wow. I enjoy his work. So yeah, I think I read, I've done some reading, but yeah, that's not.
It sounds like it's one of those pieces that isn't central to what you do, but it's an idea.
It's an idea, and I honor it, but it wouldn't really work with my crowd. I have a lot of like business people and doctors, and
yeah, it works for me in a guided meditation sense. I don't sit with someone and go, so you're angels, and they're like, hey man, what are you talking about?
What my concern would be.
But if you use it as a guided meditation, people are already surrendering the idea of logic to the idea of presence.
Absolutely. Right? And so I support what you're doing, because I think what's happened is secular psychology in an age where religion has been released. Right. Secular psychology has become its own religion, with therapists as the new ministers and the new rabbis, so to speak.
Sure.
And I think devoid of religion, this is where psychology is failing, that we need to bring religious sensibility and perspectives, that sometimes this is how you can help people who haven't been helped by cognitive behavioral therapy. Oh, I'll have to redesign that thought. Let's see if that works out. Right. So, I think
I know, but religion has so much baggage and so many wounds in it right now, in terms of, what a human being does with the ideas of religion, that I, for a lot of people, it's just not on the table. It's just, you know what? No.
But we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right?
Well, tell me, why?
Because yes, religion has been abused and misused or whatever, but what we were not appreciating is any number of things that religion was doing well, right? Whether it's creating a mentality of can do, let's everybody cook up a storm and help the lady down the street with, her new baby. There's any number of sensibilities, and it gave us an outlet for religious orientation. Right now, I think what's happening is people bring religion into their politics. Not that recycling isn't important, but anything can become a religious ritual, which then becomes religiousized. And
And
then
anything can become, there's an orthodoxy to what we're a fixed mindset, Carol Dweck approach that
yeah.
people have, that it is and it is and it is, and that's that. And as opposed to a growth mindset. I often say with people, and anyone who's listened to my podcast knows this one, is that spirituality is about relationship to yourself, to others, and to the universe, and to the earth.
Yep.
But religion is an attempt at a fitness program, right? That you got to use your Shabbat dumbbells to actually have 6 days of doing and 1 day of being. You've got to be able to. The religion itself gives you rituals for life and death and marriage and children and all those things, and it gives you community by saying, if we just do this part together, then like I know people often who, I had somebody who was a major part of a synagogue. He was there every week, and he said, what, praying means nothing to me. Like I don't actually connect to this idea that there's a God. And I said, but you're here every week. And he said, Ralph, I'm here for Kiddush. I'm here for sitting with people and eating and talking and getting, watching people grow up and people get old and people die and all of that. So because there is an architecture there, he can live in that house of religion, right?
Well, beautiful, but religion has all of this in it. And even though people may struggle with certain things, the beauty is you can come in the door, find a little nook and cranny that you can unpack. There's so many nooks and crannies,
mm-hmm.
and don't throw it out. So, I have had clients. I have one client, not Jewish, who ended up going to Israel, and she's involved in the Kabbalah Center now. And she got really into Kabbalah. She went 10 days to Israel for like $4,000. Oh, she's like, it's so funny to me. So, but other times, sometimes clients will get into their own religion.
Sure.
Great. Like, so, and it's like religion does give people something that their digital technology doesn't. So folks, it's time to revisit that. And I hope I can be the person who brings a whiff of that and pointing them in their own direction so that they can unpack it and bring a richness, a depth that maybe they haven't had in a secular society and wouldn't get from a secular therapist.
Yeah, Yuval Harari wrote Homo Deus.
Yeah.
Besides Homo sapiens.
Oh, I know. Okay.
Yeah, he's got another book, Homo Deus. And part of his, from what I'm almost finished, but what I'm gathering is we are now God.
Yes.
Right? First we had this God over there. And then about 300 years ago, humanism started to take shape. And now we have humanism in full bloom. But that's not doing it. So now we're moving to a techno God, a techno deus, where Google and Amazon, they actually have programs on immortality, how to find a way to live forever, right? So that kind of lack of humility, that hubris, this is why I worry about this idea that of all the trillion billion stars, us as people have this relationship with the divine that is exclusive. So for me, it's just like, maybe we should stop thinking like it's like the chosen people part of Judaism, which I find highly problematic because it breeds exceptionalism. It breeds, how many Nobel Prizes per capita? And just like, what? That's not what this is supposed to be about, that we're better than everybody else. We choose to be part of what everybody else is and help with all those things. Okay, one more thing. What happens when we die?
What when we die, our luminosity returns to its point of origin. And at that moment, we are able to enjoy the fruit of everything that we have achieved. And in the same way, how you look forward to something. I can't wait till my wedding, the publication of my book, these landmark things. And when it comes, you notice there's no moment like, oh, it was so fab. No, it's like we wait. And then it's like, well, what's my next thing to really work towards? So the mystical idea, as I understand it, is that moment of halashing. It's like, oh, it's fabulous. That's then. So do it now. And you're really going to just have your Sally meets Harry moment.
But do you have to be a good person to get there? Or does it matter how you've behaved? And are you really in any way a corporeal being that's still Annette or Ralph? Or are you just part of the stardust of the universe?
Oh no, you have a relationship both to your own, one foot in your own identity and one foot into the magnitude of nothingness and everything that you have done when you have been only on your own team and not melding in and creating something for the greater good. Yeah, that registers and it's a source of pain. And anything that you did, which was your exquisite little bit that helped the whole world and the Unity Project function better, is going to be like, it's going to be fabulous, right? Like that. That's how I understand it.
Right. So, but that would require that we believe there is the human version of good and bad. That ours is actually, it's right.
Well, let's put it this way. I think we need some kind of hierarchy that helps us understand how to aim. We want to aim from here. We want to somehow make something better. We have to have some kind of value system where we kind of go, well, here it is now, but if 5 years I was in a way that I would be happier, things would be better, what is that? So we got to kind of come up with some hierarchy where we see a destination that we feel is worthy of our aim, right?
Well, there you go, because in the Jewish version of sin is not a bad deed. It is actually a bad aim.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the strange part.
Yeah.
All right. Tell me 2 books of yours that you'd like people to know about.
Well,
because you have about 1 million, so tell me 2.
Yeah, I know. So this one, Kabbalah Cafe, is at Israel's bookstore right now. Ancient Wisdom for Modern Minds. And this I am taking essays where I take classical concepts in psychology, bridge them with Kabbalah, bridge them with Chinese medicine, and showing that intersection where lots of ideas come together, showing one core truth through different traditions or lenses. And then, of course, the one I really enjoy doing it, I think it's really interesting, is also at Israel's bookstore right now, which is called the Knock Knock, the Kabbalah of Comedy, and How, Why, and What of Funny. And if we have any Mary Tyler Moore fans, you got to read it. Okay. You're going to go like, oh my gosh, that's absolutely true. And who knew?
Didn't it kill you that on Seinfeld, no one ever says they're Jewish? And yet the entire show couldn't be more Jewish if it tried.
I have to admit, I only watched 5 episodes very recently, and I did not have a major connection to Seinfeld. I have to admit. So
you didn't see it as a bunch of Jews in a New York apartment?
Okay, I did.
Because it was.
Yes, I did. I did see that, but I did not, because I feel it was not as funny as some of the stuff going on Rhoda, on Mary Tyler Moore.
Oh, totally different. It's a different kind of comedy. It is.
Yeah.
It's from the school of irony, and
slapstick a little bit.
Well, but also really taking the essence of observational stand-up. Did you ever notice when you're walking, that's what he is.
Liked that. I liked that piece, him doing those little I thought there was good stuff in there.
And that's the root of what the next, like the person who has to go pee so badly, they pee in a parking lot and they can't find their car. That's the kind of thing where it's like, oh my God, people do that. I know. I did that once when I was, that's the kind of crazy of it. So that's right. What he's doing. He's saying,
and I appreciate that. Let me revise my comment.
Yeah, yes. but for Mary Tyler Moore, it's much more about situational comedy.
Yes,
which is another classic form. Dick Van Dyke Show.
Yes,
that was a whole Sheldon Leonard thing. Everybody did that at that point. All right, don't get me into comedy. I'll never get out.
Okay.
Annette Poizner has been my guest on Not That Kind of Rabbi. Wonderful conversation.
Thank you. I've so much enjoyed it.
Oh, good.
Share many interests.
Absolutely. And hopefully we'll talk again. We'll find something to pick on, and then we'll co-write a book. That'll be fun.
Okay, for sure. And I'm waiting for your memories, sir. Okay. If you want to follow up with me, not online. Then,
yes, that would be nice. Not online is always a good idea.
Yeah.
All right. You take care of yourself.
Okay, you too.
You too. I'm Ralph Benmergui. By the way, I have a book that has just come out called I Thought He Was Dead. It's a spiritual memoir, and I'd love for you to take a look. There's some stuff on Facebook about it right now. It is available. Now, Amazon, for some reason, is taking forever to get it out the door. But if you want it, go to info@woolsackandwin. Wolsak, Wolsak and Win, one word, Wolsak and Win, with no E on the Win, WYNN, wolsakandwin.ca. So info@wolsakandwin.ca, and you can get a copy of I Thought He Was Dead. It was a pleasure to write. People are being very kind about it. So if you're interested, please do that. And check me out on the Canadian Jewish News's website for my podcast that I do for them called Yehupitzville, about Jews who live in far-flung places. I enjoy doing that one as well. You take care of each other, and we'll see you soon. I'm not that kind of rabbi. Bye.